Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. They thought they could steal my son's soul for their war, I whispered as I watched the clones march down the avenue, a sea of Jamie's face, each one a mirror of the boy I buried. The drums thundered, echoing through the heart of the city, and the roar of the crowd was a funeral dirge in disguise. The clones moved with mechanical grace, boots striking the pavement in perfect sync. Banners fluttered overhead. Honor, duty, sacrifice. Words that once meant something to me, until I learned what they'd done. I gripped the controls in the blacked-out van, my breath ragged. On the screen, one clone's eyes flickered, Jamie's eyes. My Jamie. I felt my chest tighten, the years of grief surging like a fresh wound. He was more than a soldier, he was my boy. But they'd turned his DNA into a weapon, stripped him of everything that made him human. Focus, Lucas, Cypher's voice crackled in my earpiece, pulling me back. The neural lattice is locked. You're the only one who can set them free. I closed my eyes, remembering Jamie's laughter on a dusty battlefield, the promise he made before that last patrol. I'll come home, Dad. I promise. They thought they could keep him from me forever. But tonight, they'd see what a father's fury could do. Hey there, amazing audience. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly fuels my passion and keeps these stories coming. I'd love to hear what you're thinking, so drop a comment below and share your thoughts or your own experiences. Let's build a community where stories come alive and every voice is heard. So, don't hold back. Click like, hit subscribe, and let me know you're here. And now, let's continue the story. The city was electric, flags snapping in the summer breeze, brass bands belting out triumph. But under the bright lights, the clones' faces were cold, blank, and so heartbreakingly familiar. I watched from the van's monitors as the lead clone, Echo 1, raised his rifle in a flawless salute. The same square jaw, the same defiant tilt of the head. It was Jamie, and it wasn't. Cypher typed furiously beside me, eyes locked on the scrolling code. Their neural matrix is stable, he said, but they're built to obey, unless you break that lock. I nodded, my throat tight. My hands trembled as I reached for the console. Each clone's data stream danced across the screen, names reduced to serial numbers, lives reduced to orders. A memory hit me like a bullet. Jamie, 10 years old, laughing as he held a wooden rifle, yelling bang, in the yard. Jamie, I whispered, my voice cracking. Cypher glanced at me, his jaw set. Lucas, if we don't move now, they'll be soldiers forever. Mindless. Soulless. I swallowed my grief. Then let's show them what a soul looks like. I keyed in the first override, the line of code that would rewrite everything the military thought they owned. On the monitor, Echo 1's head snapped, as if he'd heard me. His lips parted, but no sound came. The parade rolled on, but for me, time had stopped. A single bead of sweat traced down my temple as I watched Echo 1 break step, just a fraction, but enough to make my breath catch. The parade commander barked orders, but the clone's gaze flicked, searching. Cypher swore under his breath. That's it. You got through. He's waking up. I pressed closer to the screen. Echo 1's lips moved, just a whisper, but I could almost hear it. Dad. My pulse roared in my ears. I reached for the mic, my finger hesitating on the transmit button. Don't, Cypher warned. If they trace it back to you now, it's over. Let the override do its job. But I couldn't look away. That was Jamie's mouth. Jamie's eyes. The raw ache of loss became a fire in my veins. Outside, the parade was a pageant of lies, generals and polished medals, the president smiling from the stands. They didn't see the truth in those clones' eyes. But I did. I remembered Jamie's last breath in the back of a dusty Humvee, the promise he'd made to me in a letter. I'll always be with you, Dad. No matter what. I took a breath, steadying my voice. Hold on, son, I said softly, almost to myself. I'm coming for you. Echo 1's head turned slightly, almost like he'd heard me. And for the first time since Jamie's death, I I didn't feel alone. The night after the parade rehearsal, I sat in the darkened van, the blue glow of the screens washing over me. My hand hovered over the mouse, clicking through old videos of Jamie stored on a battered external drive. On the screen, Jamie was 17, fresh out of boot camp. He was grinning in the desert sun, helmet askew, a dust-smeared face that still held all the mischief of his childhood. "Dad, I'm fine. Okay?" He laughed into the camera. "Tell Mom not to worry. I'm where I'm supposed to be." I closed my eyes, letting his voice wash over me. The same voice I'd heard on the parade grounds today, hollow and twisted in the clone's mouth. Cypher was at his laptop, scanning code with laser focus. "You shouldn't do this to yourself, Lucas," he muttered, not looking up. "It'll break you." "It already did," I said quietly. The video cut to Jamie and me on a fishing trip, years before he enlisted. He was a kid again, laughing as he reeled in a fish that wasn't even half the size of his grin. My throat tightened. "Why him, Cypher?" I asked, my voice a rasp. "Why my son?" Cypher stopped typing, his face grave. "Because he was the perfect soldier. Smart, fearless. They wanted to bottle that, Lucas. Make 1,000 Jamies to fight their wars." I felt my fingers curl into fists. The weight of betrayal was a living thing in my chest. On the screen, Jamie's laughter echoed in the empty van. A sound from the past, and a promise I couldn't let die. "I'm going to finish this," I said, my jaw set. "No matter what it costs." Cypher gave me a long, steady look. "Then let's make damn sure it's worth the cost." The next morning, I slipped through the back entrance of the lab's admin building, my uniform blending with the regular staff. The security pass I'd borrowed from an old contact was my only lifeline in the labyrinth of sterile corridors. I moved fast, my breath tight in my chest. My boots echoed on the polished floor, but I forced myself to stay calm, just another face in the war machine. The server room was a fortress of humming servers and blinking lights, the air cold and antiseptic. Cypher's voice was in my earpiece, calm and clipped. "Keypad to your left," he said. "Code January 7th, 45. I punched it in, the door unlocking with a soft hiss. Inside, the rows of data towers loomed like silent sentinels. I approached the main console, hands steady despite the adrenaline. A login prompt glowed on the screen. Cypher whispered, "You've got 2 minutes." They rotate the encryption keys every cycle. I slid the flash drive in, the override code I'd spent weeks perfecting. A cascade of files exploded on the screen, project files, test logs, neural schematics. My eyes scanned the headers. Project Echo, cloning viability. Subject DNA, Jamie Grant. My throat burned. Jamie's life, reduced to a file, viability, suitability, genetic purity. Words that belonged in a butcher's ledger, not my son's legacy. I clicked open a subfolder marked Behavioral Conditioning. Footage played. Jamie's clones in combat drills, taking bullets without flinching, faces set in eerie calm. Cypher's voice cut in, urgent. "Lucas, 30 seconds. Get the data and get out." I copied everything, fingers flying over the keyboard. The screen showed Echo 1, Jamie's clone, hesitating in the footage, a flicker of something human in his eyes. I took one last look at the screen before pulling the flash drive free. My heart was a war drum in my chest. They thought they could own my son's soul, but they didn't count on me. I left the lab with the data burning in my pocket, but the memory of that footage seared deeper. Echo 1's hesitation haunted me, a flicker of my Jamie in a sea of obedience. I drove through the night, headlights cutting through the dark, the city lights fading behind me. My hands tightened on the wheel as I pulled into the cemetery gates. Jamie's grave was at the edge of the old military section, where marble headstones lined up like silent soldiers. I stepped out into the cold night air, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I knelt beside the grave, tracing the engraved letters with a shaking hand. Jamie Grant. Son. Soldier. Hero. They stole you from me twice, kiddo, I whispered. First the war, then this. I thought of the clone's face, the same eyes that once lit up with dreams of college, of a family. I thought of the cold file that turned his DNA into a tool. "I swear to you, Jamie," I said, my voice breaking. I'm not letting them erase you. Not while I'm still breathing. The wind rustled the flags at the headstones, 1,000 silent witnesses to my vow. Cypher's voice crackled in my earpiece. Lucas, you okay? I stood, wiping my eyes. No, I said. But I will be. Once they pay for what they did. I turned my back on the grave, the resolve in me burning like a fuse. The funeral they gave Jamie was for the cameras. The real fight for his soul was just beginning. And I would not lose. The military headquarters buzzed like a hornet's nest when I arrived under the guise of a routine audit. My forged credentials passed me through security. I was a ghost in plain sight. Inside, polished boots clicked down endless marble hallways. Soldiers in dress uniforms nodded as I passed. But every smile felt like a lie, every salute a mockery. I kept my head down, slipping past conference rooms where brass strategized over coffee and medals. My target was the restricted sub-basement, the place they never let the public see. Cypher's voice was low in my earpiece. You're close, Lucas. Room 12B. That's where they're briefing the brass about the clones. Keep your mic open. I pressed against the door, heart thundering as I listened. The clones are operational, a cold voice said. Completely loyal. We can deploy them in the Pacific if the situation escalates. Another voice, older, clipped. And what about the genetic donor's family? Any risk of exposure? I clenched my jaw. That's me they're talking about. None, the first voice assured. The father's a retired captain. He won't be a problem. I almost kicked the door down right then. But Cypher's voice steadied me. Patience, Lucas. Let them think you're harmless. Inside, they kept talking. The clones are perfect soldiers. No hesitation. No memories to cloud them. But they were wrong. I'd seen the flicker in Echo One's eyes, the ghost of my boy inside. I memorized every word, every face. These men thought they owned my son's DNA, thought they owned my grief. As I slipped away, Cypher's voice was a lifeline. Get out clean, Lucas. We've got what we need. I walked out of that building with fire in my veins. They thought I was no threat. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The safe house was a rundown apartment on the edge of the city, walls peeling, lights flickering. It was perfect, forgotten, like the truth they'd tried to bury. Cypher was at his rig, cables snaking around him like a spider's web. He looked up when I entered, his eyes tired but alive. Did you get it? I pulled the recording device from my pocket, setting it on the table. Every word, every lie. Cypher played it back, the cold voices of the brass echoing in the room. Completely loyal. Deploy them in the Pacific. I paced the floor, fist clenching. They're planning to use them in covert ops. Disposable soldiers. Cypher watched me. They're using your son's DNA to fight wars he never signed up for. The words tasted like acid in my mouth. They said I wouldn't be a problem, I said, my voice low and hard. They don't know what a father's rage feels like. Cypher's fingers flew across the keyboard. I've cracked their comms net. We can broadcast the truth, but it'll be risky. I nodded. I don't care. We're not just going to tell the world. We're going to show them. In the corner of the room, a battered photograph of Jamie stared back at me, a kid with a goofy grin and a life full of promise. I took the picture in my hands. They think these clones are perfect because they have no memories, I said. But Jamie was more than a perfect soldier. He was a son. My son. Cypher gave me a look, part respect, part warning. Then let's make sure the world sees that before the next parade. I nodded, feeling something shift inside me. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I was a father, and a father's fury is a weapon no one can command. Cypher's lair was lit only by the glow of screens, lines of code pulsing across them like veins in a living body. He was in his element, eyes locked on the data that could bring the brass to their knees. He cracked his knuckles and gave me a sideways grin. You sure you're ready for this, Lucas? Once we start, there's no going back. I met his gaze without flinching. My son's already dead. They can't take anything else from me. He nodded and leaned in, fingers dancing across the keyboard. All right then. Project Requiem, just like we planned, but bigger. I'm going to rewrite the clones' neural protocols from the inside. Give them back what they took. I watched the code flow, every line a promise to Jamie, into every clone forced to wear his face. Cypher kept talking, his voice low and sure. They built these soldiers to be unthinking. But memories are more powerful than any bullet. If I can reawaken that part of them, the part that remembers who they are, it'll tear their control apart. Do it, I said. Make them remember. He paused, looking at me with something like respect. This isn't just sabotage, Lucas. This is giving them back their souls. You're sure you want that responsibility? I thought of Echo One, the flicker of awareness in his eyes. Of Jamie's laughter, now weaponized in an army of perfect killers. I'm sure, I said. They're my son's echoes. They deserve the choice. Cypher grinned, wolfish and wild. Then let's make some ghosts of our own, Captain. The screens glowed brighter, and I felt it. The war I'd been born to fight. Not in deserts or cities, but in the heart of a system that thought it could erase my son. I placed a hand on the console, steady and resolute. Do it, Cypher. Let's bring them home. The safe house was thick with the smell of solder and sweat. Cypher's fingers moved across the keyboards like a symphony, lines of code spilling onto the screens. Outside, the city pulsed with oblivious life, but in here, the world was boiling down to a single purpose: justice. Here's what they don't want you to see, Cypher said, eyes locked on the display. He tapped a key and the schematics for the neural chips flickered on screen, diagrams that looked like something from a nightmare. They embedded failsafes, he explained, voice taut. Signals to keep the clones compliant. Heartbeat regulators. Neural shock failsafes. I stared at the schematics, jaw clenched. Like electric collars for dogs, I spat. Cypher's face was grim. Exactly. But see this. He pointed at a cluster of lines. A vulnerability. If I inject the right code, it'll override the entire system, give the clones a choice they were never supposed to have. A choice. The word felt like a promise. You're saying you can wake them up? I asked. He nodded. If I trigger it during a live broadcast, there's no way they can cover it up. It'll be the brass's worst nightmare. An army of perfect soldiers suddenly remembering they're human. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the echo of Jamie's laughter deep inside. And Echo One? The flicker I saw in his eyes. He's already starting to wake up, isn't he? Cypher hesitated, then nodded. He's the key, Lucas. He's the one they can't fully control. If he remembers, the others will follow. I felt a surge of something like hope. For the first time in years, I wasn't just a grieving father. I was a man with a mission. Then let's do it, I said, my voice low and hard. For Jamie. For every clone they stole. Cypher's grin was a razor's edge. I'll need 2 days to build the backdoor, and then we take this parade of lies and set it on fire. The next 48 hours blurred into a fever dream of code and conspiracy. Cypher's apartment became our battlefield, screens glowing in the darkness, coffee and adrenaline keeping us alive. I didn't sleep. My mind was a battlefield, memories of Jamie bleeding into the data we were rewriting. Cypher tapped away, lines of code spilling like poetry. This is the last mile, Lucas, he murmured. We're turning their weapon into your son's final stand. I watched the footage of Echo One over and over, the tiny hesitations, the way his eyes flickered with something deeper than training. He's in there, I whispered. Jamie's soul, it's still fighting. Cypher paused, glancing at me. You know, you're not just hacking the military, Captain. You're hacking death itself, giving your son's memory a chance to rise up. I met his gaze. Then let's do it right. We worked in silence, the only sounds the hum of machines and the distant wail of sirens. I thought of the generals in their clean offices, signing off on lives like they were nothing. I thought of every father who buried a son in a flag-draped box. And I thought of Echo One, the boy with my son's eyes, waiting for me to set him free. When Cypher finally leaned back, exhaustion and triumph in his face, I knew it was done. Upload's ready, he said, voice hoarse. All we need is the parade feed. And once it's live, there's no going back. I nodded, feeling a fierce calm settle in my chest. Then we do it live, in front of the whole damn world. Cypher cracked his knuckles, a wild light in his eyes. They thought they were building perfect soldiers. They didn't count on a father's love. 2 nights before the parade, I sat alone with the final piece of this puzzle, a battered hard drive. Every memory of Jamie I had left. Videos of his first steps. His crooked grin as he showed off his first bike. His proud smile the day he pinned on his corporal's stripes. I watched them all, every second a blade that cut and healed at the same time. Jamie, I whispered, they stole your DNA, your face, but they can't steal this. I took the hard drive and plugged it into Cypher's rig. What are you doing? He asked, wary. I looked him in the eye. I'm giving them more than just a backdoor. I'm giving them Jamie. Cypher understood in an instant. You're embedding his memories into the code? I nodded. They wanted blank slates. We'll give them a mirror. Let them see the boy they stole. The boy who laughed, who dreamed. Cypher worked with me, mapping memories to the override, his fingers flying over the keys. This is more than sabotage, Lucas, he said, breathless. This is resurrection. As the memories streamed into the code, I felt something shift, not just in me, but in the room, in the air itself. I could almost see Jamie's smile in the flicker of the screens. Cypher's voice was quiet. When the clones see this, they'll remember what they're fighting for. I nodded, feeling tears sting my eyes. Then let them remember. Let them all remember who Jamie was and what he stood for. The screens glowed brighter, like dawn breaking over a battlefield. I took a breath, the weight of the mission settling on my shoulders like armor. Tomorrow, the parade. Tomorrow, the world would see my son's soul, and the army they thought they controlled would show them what a father's love can really do. The lab's core was a cathedral of wires and servers, the cold hum of machinery echoing through the sterile white walls. Cypher and I stood over the terminal, our eyes locked on the final sequence of code, the neural lattice that kept the clones obedient. It looked like a spider's web on the screen, every strand a pathway in their synthetic minds. My throat was tight, the weight of what we were about to do pressing on my chest. Each line here, Cypher murmured, his voice almost reverent. It's a leash. Orders they can't question, memories they'll never know. I ran a hand over the monitor's edge, feeling the cold metal. And this, I said, my voice low and resolute, is where we cut the leash. Cypher's fingers flew over the keyboard, injecting the final override. I'm embedding Jamie's memories here, where the orders once lived. If Echo 1 remembers who he is, he'll become the key that unlocks the others. The code shifted on the screen, a silent revolution in the making. A flicker of static cut through the monitor, and for a second, I saw Echo 1's face, his eyes alive with something that wasn't just obedience. He's fighting it, Cypher said, awe in his voice. He's trying to wake up. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the screen. Hold on, son, I whispered. I'm almost there. The data upload pulsed like a heartbeat, lines of Jamie's laughter and defiance merging with the clone's commands. Cypher's hands moved in a blur, sweat beading on his forehead. Almost done, he gritted. They won't see this coming. I laid a hand on his shoulder. Let them think they've won. Let them smile for the cameras. We'll be the ghosts in their system. Cypher shot me a tight grin. Then let's show them what ghosts can do. Dawn crept over the city in streaks of copper and red. The morning of the parade, the day we'd set everything in motion. I sat in the back of the van, staring at the screens. The clones were lined up in perfect formation on Pennsylvania Avenue, rifles at their shoulders, eyes dead to the world. Except for Echo 1. Cypher leaned in, voice low. You see it, don't you? I nodded, pulse pounding in my throat. Echo 1's fingers twitched against his rifle, a tiny, human movement. His eyes scanned the crowd like he was searching for something. Me. I tapped the mic. Echo 1. I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me yet. You're not just a weapon. You're my son's Echo. Remember who you are. Cypher's voice was steady, calm. Lucas, the code's live. Once we trigger the upload, they'll see everything. His memories, his soul, everything they tried to bury. On the screen, the brass sat in the viewing stand, smug smiles beneath dress blues and polished metals. They had no idea the army at their feet was about to wake up. The drums started. The clones began to march, a river of precision and power. But Echo 1's step was half a beat off, a single crack in the perfect mask. I leaned forward, voice shaking. Jamie, if you're in there, give me a sign. Cypher's fingers hovered over the final trigger. Say the word, Lucas. On the screen, Echo One's lips parted. Just a whisper, but I saw it. Dad. The world went still. I took a breath that felt like it would tear me in half. Do it, I said. Wake them up. Cypher pressed the key. The moment the upload hit, the clones staggered as one. A ripple of confusion tore through their perfect ranks, rifles wavering, eyes darting. The parade commander shouted orders, his voice cracking like a whip. Hold formation. Hold. But Echo One's head turned slowly, his eyes wide and clear. Not a soldier's eyes. Jamie's. I saw it, the flicker of memory, the boy I raised shining through the weapon they made. Cypher's eyes were wide, sweat dripping down his temple. They're remembering Lucas. They're remembering everything. I barely heard him. My focus was locked on Echo One. He raised a hand to his temple like he was trying to pull off a helmet he couldn't see. His lips moved again. Dad. Tears blurred my vision. The door to the van banged open and she stepped in. Jamie's mother, Claire. Her face was pale, her hand shaking. Lucas, is that? I turned, throat tight. It's him, Claire. It's Jamie's Echo. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining with tears. I didn't want this, she whispered. I thought the funeral was the end. I didn't know they'd do this to him. I laid a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. They didn't count on us, Claire. They didn't count on how far a mother and father will go for their son. On the screen, Echo One's head snapped up. He looked directly into the camera, into me. And I knew, in that instant, the boy I buried was alive in that clone's soul. Claire sobbed softly beside me. Then bring him home, Lucas, she said. Bring our boy back. I looked at Cypher, the weight of her words settling into the marrow of my bones. Let's finish this, I said. For Jamie. For every soul they tried to erase. The safe house was a fortress of shadows, but we were already thinking ahead, because the next step wasn't just code. We needed hardware. Cypher and I worked through the night, mapping the military supply routes on a cracked tablet. Convoys loaded with neural chips and prototype tech moved under the radar, hidden beneath routine logistics. 3 convoys, Cypher said, tapping the screen. But this one, he zoomed in on a route snaking through an abandoned airfield. That's our window. If we intercept it, we get the chips we need to finish the override. And if we don't, they'll reprogram the clones before we can finish. I leaned over the map, every detail burned into my mind. We'll do it quiet. No bodies, no alarms. Just in and out. Claire watched us, her face set in a mask of quiet fury. You're talking like soldiers, she said softly. But that's our son's soul on the line. Promise me, Lucas, no more killing. Not if you can help it. I met her gaze, feeling the weight of her grief and my own. I swear, Claire, we're not here to kill. We're here to bring Jamie home. Cypher's van was already loaded. Dark, stripped down, a mobile war room. We rolled out under cover of night, headlights off, the world beyond our windows a blur of silent streets and flickering neon. When we reached the airfield, the convoy was there, 3 matte black trucks, soldiers lounging with cigarettes and bored eyes. Cypher's voice was a whisper. We slip in, we swap the payload with our coded chips, and we're ghosts before they know it. I checked my watch, breath steady. The time for ghosts had come. We moved like shadows across the tarmac, the trucks idling as soldiers shared jokes and checked weapons. Cypher and I wore stolen fatigues, every step measured, every breath a promise of silence. Claire waited in the van, her eyes on the monitors. Be careful, she said in my ear. Her voice was the anchor that kept me from drowning in the past. Cypher was already at the first truck, a slim device in his hand. EMP, he murmured, a grin flashing across his face. Silent and clean. He pressed it against the truck's rear panel. A brief flicker of blue, then the hum of systems dying. No alarms, no shouts. Just the night air and the low drone of engines. I climbed into the back of the truck, crates of neural chips stacked like tombstones. My fingers traced the crates. each one a potential key to unlock the clone's stolen minds. Cypher joined me, eyes bright with adrenaline. We swapped the real crates with our coded load, he said. They'll never know until it's too late. The two of us worked in silence, lifting and lowering with the precision of men who'd spent years hauling ammo in combat zones. Every crate we left behind carried our coded override, the ghost of Jamie, hidden in the hardware they thought they controlled. When the last crate was in place, Cypher met my eyes. This is it, he said. The final seed. Once they plug these chips in, the clones will remember everything. Every order, every betrayal, every moment they stole from them. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all settle into my bones. Then let's get out before they realize we were ever here. As we slipped back into the van, the first rays of dawn cracked over the airfield. And I knew the seeds of rebellion had been planted. Back at the safe house, Cypher and I watched the data pour in, tiny flickers of life as the swap chips activated in the clones' neural nets. They're waking up, Cypher murmured, his eyes glued to the code. I can see it in the feedback loops, hesitation, glitches in the formation drills. It's like they're trying to remember who they were. Claire sat across from us, Jamie's dog tags clutched in her hands. Can you talk to him? She asked, her voice a prayer. I shook my head. Not yet. But soon. On the monitors, Echo One's face flickered in and out of shadow. His eyes were different now, not just blank obedience, but something raw and real. Cypher, I said, my voice low. Can you tap his feet? Just his. I need to know if he's really in there. Cypher worked his magic, his fingers moving in a blur. A moment later, Echo One's video feed filled the screen. Close, shaky, a soldier's eye view of the world. I leaned forward, heart in my throat. Jamie, I whispered. If you can hear me, fight. Remember. For a moment, nothing. Then Echo One's lips twitched, a flicker of something that was more than programming. His gaze shifted like he was searching for something just beyond reach. Cypher looked up, a rare smile breaking through. He's in there, Lucas. I know he is. Claire pressed a hand to the screen, tears sliding down her face. Then we bring him home, she said fiercely. No matter what it takes. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. For me, for the clones, for the son I'd lost, and the army that wore his face. Morning sun streamed through the dusty blinds as Cypher and I hunched over the screens. Every click of the keyboard a heartbeat in the silence. The military's encrypted chatter crackled in Cypher's earpiece. Low, urgent, the brass had discovered something. They know, Lucas, he said quietly, eyes scanning the feed. They're running security audits. They found anomalies in the clones' routines. I clenched my jaw. How long until they figure out what we did? Cypher's fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of code shifting like quicksilver. They suspect sabotage. They're moving to resecure the neural chips. We're running out of time. Claire stood at the window, her eyes fixed on the horizon. You promised you'd bring him home, Lucas, she said softly. We can't lose him again. I turned to her, my voice calm but unyielding. I'm not losing him. Not this time. On the screens, footage of the clones' formation drills played, flawless precision, but now with cracks in the armor. Echo One hesitated just a heartbeat longer, a flicker of confusion. Cypher looked up. They're deploying the general. He's coming to inspect the clones personally. If he sees what's happening, I cut him off. Then we show him. We show the whole damn world. The general's face flickered on the screen. Cold, calculating, the man who signed Jamie's DNA away like it was nothing. I felt the weight of every fallen soldier, every grieving family who'd been lied to. He thinks he owns them, I said, my voice low. But he doesn't understand. You can't own a soul. Cypher's grin was fierce. Then let's make him understand. We were done hiding. This was the beginning of the final battle, and I was ready. The day of the parade arrived like a storm on the horizon, all noise and tension. Cypher and I packed the van with gear, every wire and drive humming with the weight of what we'd built. Claire stood by the door, her hands trembling as she handed me Jamie's dog tags. Take them, she said, her voice shaking. For luck. For him. I closed my hand around the tags, the cool metal grounding me. For him, I repeated. Cypher's fingers drummed on the dashboard as we rolled out, the city's empty streets bathed in dawn light. You know this is it, right? He said, glancing at me. Once we go live, there's no going back. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the road. I'm done going back. I'm done hiding. As we reached the staging ground, the clones were already in perfect formation, Echo One at the front, his face a mask of calm. But I saw it in his eyes, the flicker of memory, the ghost of my son fighting to break free. Cypher tapped a key, the final override loaded and waiting. We trigger this, and the Brass's perfect army becomes a testament to their betrayal, he said. The world will see what they did. I looked out at the parade ground, the flags snapping in the wind, the generals and politicians in their suits and medals, smug and blind. They wanted an army, I said, my voice quiet. We'll give them a reckoning. Cypher's grin was sharp as a blade. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. The parade ground was alive with spectacle, brass bands playing, the roar of the crowd a tidal wave of noise. But all I saw was Echo One, his face so achingly familiar it was like a punch to the chest. He stood at the head of the formation, rifle at his side, eyes scanning the crowd. I knew those eyes, the way they used to light up when Jamie scored a goal on the soccer field, the quiet way they watched the world. Cypher's voice was in my ear, calm and steady. Lucas, it's time. Once you give the word, there's no going back. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my bones. Do it, I said. On the screen, Echo One flinched, just a flicker, but enough. His fingers twitched on the rifle, his head turning slightly as if he heard a voice only he could understand. I pressed my hand to the screen. Jamie, remember who you are. The band played on, the generals smiling for the cameras, but I saw the moment Echo One's eyes changed. The blank mask fell away, and for a heartbeat, I saw my son in those eyes. Cypher's fingers moved in a blur, the final override slipping through the system like a ghost. The clone stiffened, then something cracked. Echo One turned, his voice a whisper that only I could hear through the feed. Dad. My breath caught. I'm here, son, I said. I'm here. The world didn't know it yet, but the perfect soldiers they'd built were about to rise up. And my boy's face would be the first they saw. The final override pulsed through the clones' neural nets like a lightning strike, shattering the obedience that had been forced into their minds. Echo One blinked as if waking from a long nightmare, his lips parting in a breath that was more human than any command. The brass on the reviewing stand didn't see it, not yet. They were too busy polishing medals and giving speeches. But I saw it, and so did Cypher. Lucas, Cypher said, his voice tight, the systems flooding with memories. Every clone, every last one of them, they're feeling it. On the screen, the formation wavered, boots out of sync, rifles trembling in hands that remembered more than war. Echo One's head turned, his gaze locking on the cameras like he knew the world was watching. The parade commander barked orders, voice breaking as he tried to force the clones back into line. But Echo One didn't flinch. He looked straight ahead, and for the first time, his voice carried more than programming. We remember, he said. The words were quiet, but they cut through the noise like a blade. I felt a shiver go down my spine. My son's voice, no longer just an echo, but a living, breathing defiance. Cypher's fingers flew over the keys. We're broadcasting this to every major network. The world's about to see what they've done. I watched the screen, my hand gripping Jamie's dog tags like a lifeline. The general's face turned ashen as he saw the clones falter. He shouted orders, but the formation was gone, replaced by a single voice that refused to be silenced. Echo One raised his head, and I knew the parade was no longer theirs. It was his. The city was a roar of confusion and alarm as the clones stepped out of line, rifles lowered, eyes alive with the memories we'd given them. Soldiers on the sidelines shouted, their confusion feeding the chaos. Cypher leaned closer to the mic, his voice calm. Echo One, do you hear me? You're not just a clone, you're Jamie's echo. You're free. The feed crackled as Echo One turned his head, the camera catching every detail of the defiance in his eyes. I remember, he said, the words halting but strong. I remember him, my father, My mother, my life. Claire's breath caught beside me, tears streaming down her face. That's our son, she whispered. The generals tried to seize control, barking orders to the soldiers. But it was too late. The clones' perfect unity was gone. They moved like men waking from a long sleep, glancing at one another as if seeing themselves for the first time. Cypher's fingers flew across the keyboard. They're trying to kill the feed. I'm holding it open, but they're going to come for us, Lucas. We don't have much time. I pressed a hand to the mic, my voice steady. Echo 1, listen to me. You're not alone. We're with you. We're your family, and family doesn't leave each other behind. On the screen, Echo 1's lips curved into a faint, broken smile. Family, he echoed. The other clones looked to him, their rifles lowering in silent accord. A single ripple of humanity in a formation built for war. Cypher's face was grim but determined. We're in the final stretch, Lucas. Get ready. Once they see this, there's no going back. Hours before the parade, they drilled the clones like machines, endless lines of precision, a display of inhuman perfection. I'd watched it all from the shadows, my fists clenched in silent fury. I remembered the brass's smug voices in the hall. Perfect soldiers, no conscience, no fear. But they were wrong. I'd seen it in Echo 1's eyes, the glimmer of something they couldn't program away. As the clones marched under the sun's harsh glare, I'd walked the perimeter, every step a promise to the boy I had buried. I watched Echo 1 stumble once, his eyes flickering like a man fighting a nightmare. A drill sergeant's voice cracked like a whip. Stay in line. Perfect formation, or you'll pay for it. But Echo 1 looked straight ahead, shoulders squared. Even then, before the override, he was fighting, a soul refusing to be silenced. I'd slipped away before the final commands, my mind already spinning with the plan Cypher and I had built. I knew the brass would see only soldiers, but I saw ghosts. My son's echoes in every face. Back in the safe house, I'd stared at the feed long into the night, the flicker of Echo 1's hesitation replaying over and over. Claire's voice had broken the silence. Lucas, if he remembers you, he'll remember who he was. Who he was meant to be. I nodded, feeling the weight of every promise I'd made, and every promise I'd broken. Then let's remind him, Claire. Let's remind them all. And so, as the parade began, I held on to that memory, the boy who once ran barefoot through the yard, laughter in his eyes. And I vowed that no matter how this ended, Jamie's soul would not be forgotten. The world outside the van was chaos and pageantry, the brass band's martial beat, the crackle of static-filled radios, the general's commands echoing down the wide avenue. But inside the van, time had narrowed to a single moment, the final upload. Cypher's fingers moved like a blur, his face lit by the cold glow of the screens. Lines of code streamed past, every one a bullet aimed at the system that had stolen my son. Lucas, he said, his voice a low growl, once I hit execute, every clone's neural chip will be flooded with the override. It's irreversible. I met his gaze, my knuckles white around the dog tags. Then do it. He paused, fingers hovering. Are you ready for what comes next? I didn't hesitate. I've been ready since the day they took Jamie from me. The final line of code blinked, waiting. Cypher's lips curved in a grim smile. Let's bring him home. He hit the key. The screen shuddered. The data stream exploded in a silent flash of white, and then everything was quiet. On the main monitor, Echo 1's eyes went wide, his breath catching in his throat. His fingers clenched around the rifle, not in obedience, but in memory. Dad, he whispered, and the sound of his voice, the voice of my boy, hit me like a bullet to the chest. Claire clutched my arm, tears streaming down her face. He remembers, Lucas. He remembers. Cypher's jaw tightened. The generals will see this. They'll try to shut it down. But they can't stop it. This is bigger than them now. I nodded, my voice hoarse. Then let them come. We're not backing down. The final upload was complete. The clones had their memories, and the world was about to see what a father's fury could do. The mid-morning sun turned the parade ground to gold, but for me, it felt like a battlefield. Echo 1 stood at the head of the formation, the rifle in his hands forgotten, his eyes searching for me. Through the feed, I could see it, His lips moved again, the voice that wasn't just an echo anymore. "Dad," he said, his tone uncertain, but real. I know you." My breath caught. "Jamie," I whispered back, though he couldn't hear me through the static of the parade's broadcast. "I'm here, son. You're not alone." Cypher's eyes were fixed on the screen, sweat on his forehead. "Lucas, the other clones, they're feeling it too. Echo One's memories are a beacon. They're all remembering, piece by piece." I watched as the formation began to splinter, a line of perfect soldiers breaking down, heads turning, eyes alive with confusion and sudden understanding. The general in the reviewing stand leapt to his feet, his face a mask of horror. "Get them back in line," he barked, but his voice was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. Echo One looked up, his jaw tightening. "No," he said, voice low but clear. "No more." My heart surged in my chest. Jamie's voice, not the echo of a dead boy, but the voice of a man taking back what was stolen. Cypher leaned in, his voice a low, urgent growl. "Lucas, this is it. This is the moment. The world's watching. He's giving them a choice, the choice they were never supposed to have." I clenched my fists, the weight of Jamie's dog tags like an anchor. "Then let him speak." On the screen, Echo One's voice rose, steady and unbreakable. "We're not your weapons. We're not your slaves. We remember who we are, and we will not fight your wars." It was the sound of everything they'd tried to bury rising to the surface. And I knew, the brass's perfect soldiers had become something they could never control. The world seemed to hold its breath as Echo One spoke, his voice ringing out over the parade ground. The crowd was silent, the brass frozen, every camera capturing the moment in high definition. I could almost feel Jamie's presence in the van with me. The boy I raised, the boy I lost, now standing in defiance for everyone to see. Cypher's voice was tight with adrenaline. "Lucas, the military comms are going nuts. They're calling it a system malfunction, but it's not. They know it's the truth." I watched the generals, their eyes wide, their lips thin with fear. They'd built an army without souls, and now they saw that soul rise up in every face. Echo One turned slowly, his eyes sweeping the reviewing stand. "You used us," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "You stole our lives and called it duty. But we're more than your shadows. We're brothers, sisters, sons." His words cut through the silence like a blade. Claire pressed a hand to the screen, tears in her eyes. "That's our son's heart speaking," she whispered. "No program can kill that." Cypher's fingers danced over the keyboard, his voice urgent. "Lucas, they're trying to cut the feed. I'm holding it, but they'll come for us soon." I met his gaze, every muscle in my body coiled with purpose. "Let them come," I said. "We're not hiding anymore." On the screen, Echo One lowered his rifle, his face calm. Around him, the other clones mirrored his defiance, rifles lowered, eyes clear. It wasn't a formation anymore. It was a family, a brotherhood of the betrayed, standing together. I leaned forward, my voice a whisper of steel. "Hold the line, Jamie. Show them what it means to remember." And in that moment, I knew. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The moment Echo One's voice echoed across the parade ground, the world shifted. But in the van, Cypher's face was pale, sweat beading at his temple. He stared at the flickering screens, his hands frozen above the keyboard. "Cypher," I said, a cold knot in my gut. "What's wrong?" He didn't look at me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "They're in the system. The brass. They found my back door." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "Can you hold them off?" He swallowed hard, fingers moving in a blur. "I can try, but they're not just fighting me in the code, Lucas. They're coming for me physically." Before I could answer, a heavy knock rattled the van's side door. My heart slammed into my ribs. Cypher's eyes met mine, wild and clear. "They know where we are." "Get the data out," I said. "No matter what." Cypher gave a small, fierce smile. "You always were the stubborn one, Captain." He reached for the wireless transmitter, the only lifeline to get the clones' memories out before the brass erased everything. "I'll hold them off," he said. "But you need to get Claire out of here." The van door burst open, a soldier in black tactical gear lunging inside. Cypher's hand shot out, slamming the laptop lid shut. "Run, Lucas," he shouted. I grabbed Claire's hand, the data drive clutched in my fist. As Cypher wrestled with the soldier, I pulled her out the back door, the air alive with the crackle of radio chatter and the sudden sharp report of a suppressed shot. We stumbled into the alley, the van a fortress under siege. I could still hear Cypher's voice, calm even as chaos roared. "Get it to the world, Captain," he said. "For Jamie. For every Echo." I didn't look back. Cypher was buying us time, and I would not let it be in vain. We ran through back alleys as the city's perfect facade cracked, the parade's brass fanfare giving way to sirens and confusion. Claire's breath came in ragged gasps beside me, but I wouldn't let go of her hand. When we finally stopped, the sun was high overhead, but it felt cold. I pulled her into the shadows of an old warehouse, the data drive clutched like a talisman in my palm. "Lucas," Claire said, her voice shaking. "Cypher, is he?" I cut her off. "He's buying us time. That's all we need." She swallowed, her eyes red-rimmed. "We can't let his sacrifice be for nothing." The phone in my pocket buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. My gut told me who it was before I even answered. "Captain Grant." The general's voice crackled over the line, cold and sharp. "You've made your point, but you're out of time." I felt the anger simmer in my chest, but my voice was steady. "You're not going to bury this, General. The world is watching." He let out a low, humorless laugh. "The world only sees what we allow, Captain. You're a soldier. You know that. Surrender now, and maybe your wife walks away." Claire's hand tightened on my arm, her eyes wide with fear. I took a breath, my voice low and calm. "You're afraid. You're afraid of the truth getting out, that the perfect soldiers you built have souls, that they're more than your weapons." Silence crackled over the line, then a hiss of breath. "You think you can win this war with memories? We own them, Captain, and we'll erase them if we have to." I clenched my fist around the drive. "Not if I get there first." The line went dead. I looked at Claire, the weight of Cypher's sacrifice, Jamie's echoes, and every soldier who'd ever trusted the brass pressing down on me. "We finish this," I said. "We finish it today." We slipped into the empty warehouse, the dusty beams of sunlight slicing through the broken windows. Claire clutched Jamie's dog tags to her chest, her eyes locked on mine. "You said no more hiding," she said. "So what now, Lucas?" I looked at the data drive, the final piece of Cypher's work. "Now we show the world what they did, and let them see my son's face." I plugged the drive into an old laptop, the screen flickering to life with footage of Echo One's defiance, the boy's soul breaking through the programming. Claire sat beside me, tears tracking down her cheeks. "Do you think he's proud of us?" she asked softly. I didn't have to think. "He's proud," I said, my voice a whisper of steel. "He was always proud. And now he's free." I hit the upload key. A progress bar crawled across the screen, each second another step closer to the truth. I could hear the distant wail of sirens, the sharp bark of orders echoing through the city. They'd come for us soon. But I didn't care. I looked at Claire, at the woman who had carried my son into this world and stood beside me in the war to bring him back. "Whatever happens next," I said, "we see this through. Together." She reached out, her hand warm against mine. Together. The bar filled, a final beep echoing through the silence. The footage was out there now, the parade, the clone's defiance, Echo One's voice claiming his humanity. I stood, every nerve in my body alive. "They're coming, Claire," I said. "But we're not afraid. We're not done." The world would see Jamie's face, and they would remember what they'd tried to erase. The dusty warehouse fell silent as the upload bar hit 100%. A soft chime, a flicker of light, and then Jamie's voice, Echo One's voice, filled the old walls. "We are not your weapons," he said. His words crackled through the speakers, but they were clear and unbreakable. "We are not your shadows. We are your sons." Claire's breath caught in her throat, her fingers tightening on Jamie's dog tags. "They'll see it now," she whispered. "All of them." On the laptop screen, the footage streamed out across the networks. Jamie's defiance on live feeds. The perfect formation of clones shattering into something human. Cypher's final code was a thing of beauty. Every frame a dagger aimed at the brass's lies. The parade, the general shock, the clones lowering their rifles in unison. I could see the feed's viewer count climb, thousands, then millions. The world was watching. Claire looked at me, eyes shining. This was always the plan, wasn't it? Not just to free him, to let everyone see what they did. I nodded, my throat tight. They tried to hide it all, the cloning, the betrayal, the soul of a son turned into a weapon. But Jamie, he's bigger than any secret. Footsteps echoed outside, boots crunching on broken concrete. Claire flinched, but I laid a hand on her shoulder. Stay calm, I said softly. We've already won. They just don't know it yet. The door rattled, a harsh voice calling out. Open up. This is your last chance. I turned to the laptop, the final image frozen on the screen. Echo One's face, calm and resolute. My son's face. I took a deep breath. They wanted to erase him. But we're going to make sure the world never forgets. The door burst open, soldiers in black tactical gear flooding the warehouse. Claire pressed closer to me, her breath ragged. Stay down, I said, my voice low and even. They're not here for you. They're here for the truth. The lead soldier raised his rifle, but his voice faltered when he saw the laptop screen. Echo One's face staring back at him. What is this? He said, his voice shaking. I stepped forward, my hands raised. This is the truth you've been ordered to bury. These aren't just clones, they're men. They're brothers. They're sons. The soldier's eyes flicked to his comrades, uncertainty blooming like a crack in his armor. Outside, I could hear the low, rhythmic thud of boots, not the polished steps of the parade, but the steady march of men who had just remembered who they were. The clones had left the parade ground. They were moving together, weapons lowered, heads held high. Echo One led them, his steps sure, his face calm. They're coming here, Claire said, her voice a whisper of awe and fear. I nodded. Jamie's army. The men they thought were perfect machines, they're free now. The soldier in front of me looked down, his rifle lowering. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice small in the cavernous silence. Stand down, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Stand down and let them see the truth. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. Yes, sir. The clones stepped into the warehouse like ghosts made real, their faces calm. Echo One paused, his eyes meeting mine. Dad, he said. We're ready. Outside, the brass's convoy rolled up in a screech of tires and a chorus of shouted orders. The general stepped out, his face pale but his jaw tight. He was the man who'd signed Jamie's DNA away, the man who thought he could own life itself. I stood in the doorway, my back straight. I wouldn't give him an inch. He pointed a gloved finger at me, his voice low and furious. You have no idea what you've done, Captain Grant. I held his gaze. I know exactly what I've done. I gave them back what you stole, their souls. Behind me, Echo One stood at the head of the clones. They didn't stand in perfect lines anymore. They stood like brothers, shoulder to shoulder, weapons lowered but unyielding. The general's lip curled in a sneer. This ends now. You're outnumbered. Outgunned. You're finished. I stepped forward, my voice calm and certain. No, General. You're finished. The world has seen what you tried to hide. The world knows now. You can't bury this. The general's face went red. You think the world cares? They'll forget. They always do. Echo One's voice cut through the air like a blade. We won't let them forget, he said. His tone was quiet, but it carried the weight of 1,000 stolen lives. The general looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You're not supposed to have a voice, he said, his words almost a whisper. Echo One stepped forward, his expression calm. I'm not just your shadow anymore. I'm his son, and I remember everything. The general took a step back, his command crumbling in the face of the truth. The clones didn't move, didn't speak. They just stood there, a silent army of memories and defiance. And in that silence, The general realized he'd already lost. The warehouse felt electric, every breath and heartbeat magnified by the tension in the air. Echo One's words hung in the silence, a final testament to everything they'd tried to erase. The general's face was a mask of shock and fury, but his voice was hollow now. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "You think the world will stand with you?" I met his gaze, my voice cold and even. "They'll stand with the truth. And the truth is standing right in front of you." Cypher's voice crackled in my earpiece, faint, battered, but alive. "The feed is still up, Captain. The world's watching. And they're listening." Claire stepped forward, her hand slipping into mine. "No matter what they try," she said, her voice fierce, "they can't silence Jamie's voice." Outside, the clones formed a half-circle around the warehouse, rifles at rest. They weren't here to fight anymore. They were here to be seen, to be remembered. Echo One looked at me, his face calm. "Dad," he said, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "We're ready for them. All of us." I felt a swell of pride so fierce it almost broke me. "Then let them come," I said. "We're not backing down." The general took a step back, his certainty cracking. Around him, his soldiers shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the clones, to the living proof of his crimes. For the first time, he looked small. Echo One raised his head, his voice ringing out over the city. "We are not yours. We are not your war. We are Jamie's memory. And we are free." The broadcast feed hummed in the background, every word carried out into the world. And I knew, no matter what came next, they would never be forgotten. The warehouse doors swung open, and Echo One stepped forward into the light. The Brass's soldiers flinched back as if they were seeing ghosts. Jamie's face, my son's face, was calm, resolute. "We're not your shadows," he said. "We're not your war." The general's lips twisted in a snarl. "Your property," he spat. "Clones. Machines." Echo One didn't move, didn't blink. "We're memories. We're brothers. And we won't fight your wars anymore." His words rippled through the clones around him, men who had been programmed to obey, now standing taller, their eyes alive. I stepped up beside Echo One, my voice steady. "These men aren't just echoes. They're the price you paid for your ambition. And today, they're taking back what you tried to steal." The general's face went pale, his mouth working soundlessly. Around him, his soldiers shifted, unsure. One of them, a young private, no older than Jamie when he enlisted, lowered his rifle. "Sir," he said quietly, I can't do this." The general's snarl turned to fury. "Coward," he spat. "We're the only ones who stand between order and chaos." But the private just shook his head. "They're not the enemy. They're us." Echo One turned his gaze to the private, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said simply. For a moment, everything was still. Then, in the silence, the truth settled in like the final shot of a war. The general was alone. Claire stepped out from the shadows, her eyes fierce. "It's over," she said. "You can't kill the truth." The general looked at her, at Echo One, at the silent army behind him. And in that moment, he knew he'd already lost. The general's face twisted with rage. "No," he snarled. "No, I will not let this stand." He pulled his sidearm, the barrel gleaming in the sun. For a split second, everything slowed, the faint glint of steel, the sharp intake of breath. My instincts roared to life, but Echo One was faster. He stepped forward, his hand closing over the general's wrist with the speed of a soldier who remembered every drill, every fight. The shot cracked through the air, a single report that shattered the momentary silence. The bullet slammed into the ground at my feet, a spray of dust and heat. Echo One twisted the gun from the general's hand, his expression calm and implacable. "You taught me to be a weapon," he said, his voice low but clear. "But I won't be your weapon anymore." The general's face was red, veins bulging. "You can't disobey me," he said. "You're not real." Echo One just stared at him, his voice quiet but unbreakable. "I'm more real than you'll ever be." Around us, the other clones moved like shadows, rifles held low but steady, eyes locked on the man who tried to erase their humanity. I stepped forward, my hand on Echo One's shoulder. Jamie, I said softly, you don't have to fight him anymore. You're free. For a moment, I saw the boy I remembered, the bright-eyed kid who used to climb trees and dream of flying planes. And I knew he was still in there. Echo One nodded once, his expression softening. I know, Dad, he said. I know. The general stumbled back, his power gone. And I realized the shot he'd fired wasn't the end. It was the start of a new chapter, one he'd never control. The clones formed up behind Echo One, not in the rigid, lifeless formation the brass had drilled into them, but in a line of brotherhood. Rifles rested across their chests, not raised in threat, but held like symbols of memory. Echo One raised his rifle, the sun glinting off the worn barrel. Then, in a single motion, he swung it up, not to aim, but to salute. One by one, the other clones mirrored him, their eyes clear, their movements precise. It wasn't the empty drill of a puppet army. It was a final act of defiance, a last salute to the lives they'd reclaimed. The general stood frozen, his mouth working soundlessly. His soldiers, the ones who had once called these men shadows, watched in stunned silence. Claire's hand found mine, her breath catching. They're not just soldiers, she whispered. They're brothers, sons, fathers, and they're free. I squeezed her hand, my chest tight with pride. Jamie, I said, my voice hoarse, you did it. Echo One turned his head, his eyes meeting mine. We did it, he said. The air felt electric, every breath alive with possibility. For the first time, I saw not an army, but a family. And I knew. The brass couldn't erase that. No one could. The last salute echoed across the empty city square, a testament to everything we'd fought for. And in that moment, I understood what Jamie had always known, that brotherhood wasn't something you could program. It was something you lived. The general tried to speak, but his voice was lost in the quiet power of the clone's final salute. He stumbled back, his eyes wild, his authority crumbling like dust. This isn't how it ends, he hissed, his voice breaking. I'll bury this. I'll bury you all. But no one moved. Not the clones, not his soldiers, not me. Echo One stepped forward, his voice calm and resolute. You can't bury the truth. We are the truth. The general's lips twisted in a snarl. You're just ghosts. Echo One's eyes didn't waver. Then we're the ghosts who will haunt you forever. I watched him, the boy who was my son's echo, the man he'd become. And I knew, in that moment, that the brass's perfect army had become something far more powerful, an army of conscience, of memory, of love. The general took one last look at the line of defiance standing in front of him. Then he turned and fled, his footsteps echoing across the cracked concrete like the last gasp of a dying empire. Claire let out a breath she'd been holding, her shoulders sagging. It's over, she said softly. I looked at her, my hand still gripping Jamie's dog tags. No, I said quietly. It's not over. It's just begun. Outside, the clones stood silent, rifles at their sides, eyes on the horizon. And I knew that whatever came next, the truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. The air was thick with silence as the general fled, his shadow swallowed by the broken walls of his own creation. Echo One lowered his rifle, the final salute fading into the echo of quiet footsteps. I stepped out of the warehouse, the sunlight warm on my face. Around me, the clones moved slowly, no longer soldiers in formation, but men finding their own way, each step a testament to the humanity they'd reclaimed. Claire moved to stand beside me, her eyes searching mine. What happens now? She asked softly. I looked out at the city, the skyline gleaming like a promise. Now they live, I said. Now they remember who they were, who they are. And no one can take that away again. Echo One approached, his expression calm but resolute. Dad, he said, his voice steady. You gave us back more than our memories. You gave us a reason to stand. I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. You were always more than their weapon, I said. You're Jamie's echo, but you're also your own man. His eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, I saw the boy he was and the man he'd become, a bridge between two worlds. We'll find our way, he said. Together. The clones gathered around him, forming a loose circle. No orders, no commands, Just a brotherhood forged in stolen memories and defiant hearts. I took Claire's hand, feeling the warmth of her grip. The data had gone out to the world, the truth written into the soul of every broadcast. We showed them, she said. We showed them who Jamie really was. I nodded, my throat tight. And we'll keep showing them. Because that's what he would have wanted. The sun dipped low on the horizon as the clones turned to go, their steps sure and unhurried. Echo One looked back once, his eyes meeting mine in a silent promise. Then he turned away, leading his brothers into a world that was finally theirs. I watched them until they vanished into the city, the quiet power of their resolve still humming in the air. Claire slipped her arm around my waist, her voice a whisper. It's done. I shook my head slowly. It's only the beginning, I said. They'll build new lives, write their own stories. And we'll remember Jamie not as a weapon, but as a son. The old laptop screen flickered one last time, the final image of Echo One's face frozen in a quiet defiance that would never fade. I turned to Claire, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders at last. We gave him back to the world, I said. And maybe we gave ourselves back too. She rested her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. I stepped back, my voice soft but certain. To everyone watching, tell me, where are you seeing this from? Where in the world are you right now? Drop it in the comments below. I want to know where our fight for truth reached. A slow smile crossed my lips, the final words carrying a spark of hope. If this story meant something to you, if Jamie's voice reached you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's keep this story alive together. The final frame lingered on the screen, the sun setting over a world that finally remembered the names of the fallen. And as the light faded, I knew the echoes of justice never truly die.